Okay, I think it's time to get started. Hello, everyone. It's the day after a Magic preseason loss. How are we feeling? We like what's going on. We like what's happening. It's time for another Locked On Magic live room here on Spotify Green Room, as well as on YouTube. If you aren't already following me on YouTube, you can find me there at Locked On Magic. You, of course, follow me on Twitter as well at PhilipRR_OMD. If you don't know, my name is Philip Rossman. I'm the host and site expert over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. I appreciate everyone who is joining me either watching live on YouTube or here in Spotify Green Room. You probably see me if you're watching on YouTube, me holding up my phone. That's so our friends in the Green Room can hear me. This is our chance to do another sort of mailbag episode, another interaction episode where we talk about the Orlando Magic, obviously coming off somewhat disappointing loss to the New Orleans Pelicans last night. If you're new to Spotify Green Room, feel free to drop a speaker request to ask a question, or you can leave a comment in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube Live, I am also monitoring the chat there, so I will answer your questions there. As we get started today, though, let's start with the big topic for the Orlando Magic is midway through the preseason. What do we make of this team so far? What do we make of the Orlando Magic? I don't think that is necessary. I don't think that's necessarily a clear answer at this point. We've had one game where the Magic looked really, really good, and another game where they didn't look so good. Not a lot of consistency between the two teams, and even consistency within the rotations that the team is playing. And I think that's actually really, really important as well, that we haven't seen this group kind of be the group that they're going to be when the regular season begins. I've been telling everyone, don't take preseason stats too much into account quite yet, especially with Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner. They're still clearly getting their foot under them. I kind of think there's also a little bit of trying to hide them a little bit, not get too much tape on them so they can play when the games count and play really, really well. But I do think what we've seen from Magic is a willingness to experiment. We've seen Wendell Carter, Mo Bamba, Robin Lopez, at least two of them on the floor at the same time. We've seen the three-guard lineup with Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, and RJ Hampton. Right now, I don't think Mosley is throwing out lineups that he's throwing out lineups he wants to see play, but he's not throwing out necessarily the rotation that we'll see during the regular season. I think that's affected Franz Wagner more than any other player. I think that he's really struggled to find his cutting space and find his place with the team, but find his rhythm especially. And the ball just isn't moving consistently quite yet. Certainly Thursday's game just did not move at all. It was really, 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 really frustrating. I want to know what your early thoughts are on the Orlando Magic as we get started. I've got Ralph Henry here in the Spotify Green Room. He comments, it's really early. A lot of things are new and still being worked out, really missing J.I. Fultz and Chuma, pretty much three starters. And that's absolutely true. Magic are down three starters too, and that's really affected the rotations that the Magic can play. I think, last night especially, Etuan Moore, Moritz Wagner, they're not going to start. I'm not worried about them playing very many minutes. I didn't think Moritz Wagner played pretty well. I thought Etuan Moore had better moments last night than he did, or Wednesday night than he did on Monday night. But Etuan Moore definitely looked a little bit shakier than I thought he would be. So, again, we aren't seeing the full rotation yet. I do think that we'll begin to see that. Chris on YouTube here, Christian Adamus. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly. Sorry about that. I'm not worried about Franz, but how about you? I'm not worried about Franz yet. I think what Franz Wagner really needs is stability. And I'll honestly say the same thing about Jalen Suggs. I think lineup stability is really going to help a lot of these players and really help them play better and be in better spots. I mean, this isn't Terrence Ross or Gary Harris, what pockets to find their play in. Franz Wagner doesn't know how to do that yet. And so I do think that, Wagner, the ball isn't whipping around the perimeter, so he's not getting the spot up looks that you want to see him get. And so, yes, I think the shot struggles I don't think they're concerning quite yet. I do think Wagner is doing some other really good things. I think defensively, he's been pretty decent. I think his positioning is pretty good. And I think that he is generally in the right spots offensively. The ball just isn't working its way to him. It isn't getting to him in spots where he can score. And so that's what I'm really talking about with these lineups right now, is I don't think they're really set up for these guys necessarily to succeed. Like the lineup last night was more to see, I think, Cole and Mo work together more than anything else. We saw the lineup with Wendell Carter in with Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter in with Robin Lopez. That's more to see Wendell Carter at the four. So when the Magic do these weird lineups in preseason especially, I think it's to look at specific things. So again, I'm not so worried about the score. Look, am I frustrated that the Magic didn't, pull that win out in the fourth quarter? Sure. But it's hard to kind of flip that switch. And again, it's not that these guys aren't trying to win. They aren't trying to play well. I think what we're seeing is the Magic are in weird spots, or they're putting their players in sort of weird spots. And so, I don't think Franz Wagner has been a focus. Now, granted, I would like to see this. I would like to see a game. I would like to see a situation for Jalen Suggs to be more of a focus offensively. I think that I think Jalen Suggs is wired to be a teammate first. And so I think that's part of his struggle so far, is that he's trying to be a teammate before he gets the ball to anyone else. I think a lot of this season is going to be Jalen Suggs figuring out when to attack, when to pull back, kind of figuring out where his spots are with this team. But I don't think that we've seen the rookies really unleash yet. And I do hope we get to see that at some point in the preseason. I do hope that is part of Jamal Mosley's plan. Suggs, again, I think Suggs is doing some really good things, especially on the defensive end, which I did not expect. Roth Henry, going further on the rookie, says Franz and Suggs need time for things to slow down. It's early. Good thing is they are showing effort and energy, and that is something I completely agree with. I do think that Suggs especially has been really good defensively. He's much better defensively than I thought he was. I think some of his struggles are he's struggling to beat guys off the dribble. Magic aren't running a ton of pick and roll actions quite yet with him. I do think that's something that he's going to have to get into, and something that he's going to have to be a little bit better at. So I do think that's something we just haven't seen yet. I mean, just remember, I do like to say you want to be better as the preseason progresses and kind of peak in those last couple preseason games. So we're at that point already with the shortened preseason. But I do think the Magic are, Jamal Mosley said it. I think Josh Robinson, The Athletic, made a really good point on this. The Magic are using these preseason games as an extension of training camp, of an extension of practice. And Mosley's essentially said that he wants these games to be like practice. So they're looking at specific things. They're trying to work on specific things. They're not necessarily going out there trying to win the game. And so, again, it's not always what you want to hear. But I do think that the Magic are really focused on doing certain things and doing certain things and seeing certain things in these minutes, in these games. And they're looking for kind of broad strokes rather than kind of seeing the specifics work out. They want to see if this Carter at the 4 can work out. It's something I did want them to try. I want to see the 3-guard lineup again. I don't think we saw it enough on Monday's game. I'd love to see it again. You want to just test these things out and get a feel for whether they can work or not before you build a final rotation. And I don't think the Magic have had a final rotation yet. I was asked this question, I think online on Twitter. Do I think the Magic will go 10 or 11 deep? I'm not sure they'll go that deep. But I do think what's really important, I think this is most important for a guy like Franz Wagner. I do think the Magic will settle on a rotation and they'll stick with it. This will not be a by committee thing. You will not see the team tinkering and changing the lineup, barring injury, of course, tinkering and changing the lineup every single night or adjusting it for matchup. I do think that we will see a consistent playing group out there once the games start to count, once the season begins. Daniel Martinson asking, what's our ideal starting lineup? I think I mentioned this on yesterday's show, but I'll mention it again here. The ideal starting lineup, Jalen Suggs, I think, is in there. I think Gary Harris is in there, whether you put them at the 1 or 2, the 2 or 3, they're both in there. I think Wendell Carter is certainly the center. And from there, it's a question of, if Jonathan Isaac's healthy, Jonathan Isaac's starting. If Markelle Fultz is healthy, it's probably Markelle Fultz. It's probably Fultz, Suggs, Harris, Isaac, Carter. With Fultz out, I think you get a little fuzzy. The way the Magic have used Jalen Suggs certainly suggests they're planning to start him at point guard, and that would mean putting Franz Wagner probably at the 3 or Chuma Okeke at the 3, along with Gary Harris. So it'd be Suggs, Harris, Wagner, Okeke, probably be both actually. Wagner, Okeke, Carter. If you're planning on moving Cole Anthony in the starting lineup, obviously that only leaves one of them. I do think Chuma Okeke is a starter, and hopefully we see Chuma Okeke here real soon. Let's get a speaker request from Chris Kovar. Chris, are you there? Chris, can you hear me? Chris, are you there? Hey, how's it going? Yeah. Sorry, that was me.
What's up?
How's it going?
Yeah. Good. So So yeah, I think you're talking about the Magic starting lineup, and obviously, I'm a Warriors fan, so I won't trash talk the Magic too
Hey,
bad.
we're really not in the same league, so no worries.
Yeah, we're not in the same division or anything. So but yeah, when the Magic, I was watching the NBA draft, and obviously I was kind of keeping an eye on Jalen Suggs for a lot of reasons, because I thought, well, maybe the Warriors will, pick him up, and obviously they went with Moses Moody and in a different direction. But I'll tell you what, the Magic, from what I've heard, and obviously I don't keep up with them, but from what I've heard, and maybe giving a little bit more insight, they look like they have a good team this year. It looks like they kind of went a lot younger this year. I don't know if they have any veteran experience on that team whatsoever. They almost did like what the Chicago Bulls did when they got Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, and what's his name from the Spurs?
DeMar DeRozan.
And kind of revamped, DeMar DeRozan, thank you, and rebuilt the team. So I don't know, like, did they bring any veteran presence in this year or no?
So they have a couple of veterans, and I actually just wrote about this on OrlandoMagicDaily.com about how the veterans are really embracing this young team. They acquired Gary Harris at the trade deadline in the Aaron Gordon trade. They still have Terrence Ross on the roster. They signed Robin Lopez as kind of a third center in case in case of injury, in case Mo Bamba doesn't really work out. So they have Michael Carter-Williams still. That surprisingly, the Magic have, I think, a really solid group of veterans. I think they do have some guys who know how to play. What they're lacking, and big difference from them with the Bulls is they lack really established star quality. Like Zach LaVine is an all-star, Nikola Vucevic is an all-star. The guys the Magic are really relying to score are very, very young and very, very unproven players. And that's, I think all the predictions that have the Magic, near the bottom of the Eastern Conference are completely fair. I will say that I kind of agree with that. I think the Magic are doing very, very hard work to temper expectations around here and not, I don't think there's an expectation, this season is not being judged by wins and losses. They want to.
It really isn't. And I think like the other thing that you guys could definitely keep in mind is, and I think this is something that's fair, even for like being a Warriors fan, where we fell last year to to the Grizzlies. I'm not going to say I was too upset about it, but then when I look at the Eastern Conference, I don't see the Magic
Oh, it looks like we lost you.
Really being a contender really right off the bat. I mean, first of all, you're dealing with the Bulls. You're dealing with the you guys are dealing with like you guys are dealing with the Bucks too. So
yeah, I mean, I think the conference imbalance. I think that the conference imbalance is narrowing a little bit. I think the big difference between the East and the West is in the East, the bad teams are really bad, whereas the West, there are some teams that end up at the bottom of the standings who are actually pretty good. Oklahoma City and Houston are probably the only two teams that are really not thinking about the playoffs this year in the Western Conference.
Yeah, but speaking of those two teams, it really did confuse me because if you look like back when they had, when the Magic, when you look at like the Rockets and the Thunder, when they had like James Harden and Russell Westbrook and Serge Ibaka and Kevin Durant all on one team for the Thunder, and they failed to win a championship, and I'm like, I'm not going to say it's going to be the same way with the Magic. Like, they're not going to waste the talent that they have, but my expectations for the Magic, even though I'm a Warriors fan, yes, obviously, but anybody who watches basketball obviously will watch the Magic every once in a while. But the thing that I don't expect out of them is a whole lot. I mean, yeah, you got Jalen Suggs, probably one of the best basketball players I've seen coming out of college. I mean, obviously, they didn't win a national championship. They lost to Baylor. But when I look at the Orlando Magic in a whole and what they've been through in like the last few years, I'm hoping that some way, that they honestly can turn this around because they need to. They really, not going to predict them to be in the playoffs anytime soon, but if I was to predict them to be one of the teams that rise from the Eastern Conference, probably. I don't know. I mean,
I think in just kind of thinking kind of long term on this, like the puzzle is still incomplete. Like, I use this analogy all the time. The Magic right now, we see a couple puzzle pieces, but we don't know what the picture on the box looks like. And I feel like a lot of what this season is for the Magic is getting an idea of what the picture on the box looks like, and figuring out, okay, Jalen Suggs is the central piece. He's that first piece that we know we need. What else do we need to make this picture work? Is that Cole Anthony? Is that Chuma Okeke? Is that Wendell Carter? Is that Mo Bamba? Figuring out who these guys, who they're going to keep, and what this is ultimately going to look like, is a big part of the season. And again, it's not about wins and losses. It's about, at least this year, it's not about wins and losses. It's about having an idea of what comes next.
Yeah, and I think, even being, when you look at the Warriors even, and I don't want to get off on the Warriors because obviously this is about the Magic, but, for the Warriors, I think, last year was a pretty good season, even to a degree. It wasn't a great season because obviously, we lost to the Grizzlies, but then, hey, the Grizzlies got knocked off in the first round. So
and that's a champion, and the Warriors are a team with championship level expectations. So even with the roster that they had.
And they're expected, and I think the Warriors are expected to be in the playoffs, especially with Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala both returning. Now, Andre Iguodala only signed a 1-year deal, and he said he's retiring after the season. So for me, being a Warriors fan, and even a Magic fan, if I'm a Magic fan, I'm not expecting anything else except, hey, this is a rebuilding year. But for the Warriors, as a Warriors fan, I'm expecting my team to at least make the playoffs as a fifth or sixth seed, or even as the first seed. Now, obviously, we have to deal with, like, you guys have to deal with Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Bucks that just came off a freaking NBA championship, which, by the way, was crazy as ever. And it's going to be crazy. You guys have to deal with the Bucks. You guys have to deal with the Nets. I wouldn't say the Cavaliers are a threat anymore because you don't have to deal with LeBron James. Thank God, because LeBron James with the Cavaliers was incredible. Don't get me wrong. But when I look, even with the Knicks and who they signed, like, Kemba Walker, I'm not expecting them with Kemba Walker and Derrick Rose to be that good. I'm not. My expectations for the Eastern Conference this year, there's not going to be a whole lot of teams. And like you said, unlike the Western Conference where, you have teams that are really bad that sneak into the playoffs, the Eastern Conference is really just, it's like the New England Patriots with Tom Brady for the longest time. The Patriots were going to get in one way or another, and then everybody else was like, what? We're the outside looking in. So do I expect the Eastern Conference to have some decent teams? Not in particular. Like that's just like my own opinion. I mean, the Celtics may be one of those teams, obviously, because they're a championship contender every year. But I'm not expecting anything else. But
yeah. And like when you're competing at the highest levels, eventually you're going to have to beat these really good teams. I mean, I think the Magic last year, they've been to the playoffs for 2 straight years. They were first round fodder. They were 7-8 seed. When they got to the trade deadline, obviously the team was struggling. They had a ton of injuries. They weren't able to be as competitive as they were. They kind of looked at the landscape. They saw, I think, a lot of these other teams starting to rise. They saw the Knicks coming. They saw the Hawks coming. They saw frankly, the Bulls coming a little bit. I think they looked at all that and said, are we going to be able to put together a team in the next, our window to compete with Nikola Vucevic is probably another 2-3 years. Are we going to be able to put together a team that's going to be competitive enough to not just get into the first round, but to advance out of the first round? I'm a big believer that, you're not stuck as a franchise unless you have a way forward, unless you can see a path forward. And for 2 years, I sat here and said, the path forward is Aaron Gordon's development. The path forward is Aaron Gordon getting good enough that you can trade him for something, for who knows what.
Yeah, exactly.
And that didn't happen.
Well, what are your thoughts? Because we're talking about the Eastern Conference. What are your thoughts on the whole Ben Simmons deal in Philadelphia? I mean, that's been the biggest, that's been the biggest thing that's really going on right now. is Ben Simmons wants out of Philadelphia. Is there a particular reason why he wants out of Philly? Because it's kind of confusing me. I mean, yeah, he's not one of the best three-point shooters. We all know that. Ben Simmons couldn't shoot a three to save his life anyway. If he could, then congratulations. But it just seems like even Joel Embiid has moved on from him, like saying, hey, look, the city's done. Now, is that true, or is it just like the whole Aaron Rodgers deal with Green Bay where like they were saying, oh, he's done, he's going to get traded? Is it really that bad in Philadelphia right now?
I will direct you to our friends at Locked On Sixers for a better answer on this. From everything that I have read and everything that I understand, Simmons does not want to be on the Sixers anymore, and he is preparing to sit out. The Sixers have already withheld the $8.25 million payment that they owed him on October 1st because he didn't report for training camp. It sounds like Simmons is he's staring down the Sixers and saying, trade me or I'm not showing up. And the Sixers are staring back and saying, don't show up and we won't pay you. And again, that just tanks his value. I think the Sixers have the cards because Simmons signed a 4-year extension. And they're like, no, you signed a contract here. You may not like it, but we're still a really good team. We still believe we can compete for a championship with you. I think there's some bad blood with some of the things that Doc Rivers said at the end of the season, and Simmons not feeling supported. Philadelphia is obviously a very tough town, but obviously the Sixers haven't found a deal that they like, and they're frankly they have no impetus to trade him if it doesn't help them win a championship. Because Joel Embiid, again, you experience this as a Warriors fan. When your championship window is open, when you've got one of the best players in the league, you got to win while they're there. The Magic had that with Dwight Howard. The Magic had a very tight window. They really did. Yeah, the Magic had it the Magic had a really tight window to win a championship with Dwight Howard. Once they made the finals in 2009, once they got out of the first round for the first time in 2008, the championship window was open. And when it closed shut, partly because LeBron went to Miami, the Magic panicked, made some bad moves. They got stuck, and Dwight looked at the situation and said, I can't win here. They're not going to be able to get me a winning team. I need to go somewhere where I can win. The Sixers are in that same boat. Joel Embiid should be winning championships, should be competing for championships. And so I agree. I think Philadelphia is absolutely right to make sure they're in a position to still win a championship and try and get as much as they can for Ben Simmons in that case, or to play with Ben Simmons, because, Simmons is still a really good player. It sounds like,
He really is. I'll commend him for his talent. But you brought up Dwight Howard on the Magic. I feel like, they kind of wasted his talent. I mean, look at what he did with the Lakers. He won a championship with the Lakers.
But that was as a backup, though. I mean, the thing with Dwight after he left Orlando was his back was really messed up, and he tried to play through it. He tried to play through it in that first stint with the Lakers. It was disastrous. He went to Houston, had a really good run in Houston. People forget how good he was with the Rockets. He still had some very good. He had at least 2 good years with the Rockets. But injuries. Dwight Howard was a tank who could not be stopped for 8-9 years in Orlando. And then he had a back injury that, that was not handled properly by either side. I don't think Dwight handled it well. I don't think the Magic handled it well, to be frank. And I don't think the Lakers handled it well when he got to Los Angeles. And that really derailed, what is a surefire Hall of Fame career. Chris, I gotta get to some other people though. Thanks for popping in.
All right, man. Hey, absolutely, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for your questions and your comments. I'm going to go ahead and get to some of those now. If you have a speaker request, you can go ahead and make it here on Spotify Green Room. If you're on YouTube, you can leave a comment as well. I'm happy to answer your questions there. So a lot of talk about the Orlando Magic starting lineup and the ideal starting lineup. Ralph Henry suggests everyone healthy. He goes with Fultz, Suggs, Chuma, J.I. Carter. I think that's a really good lineup. I would say I'd like to see Gary Harris in there, just for some veteran leadership. Again, a lot of that is dependent on Gary Harris being able to hit 3-pointers consistently, but Harris is a really good defender. I think we saw that especially in the game against the Celtics. He struggled a little bit with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but I think he was also switched on to him after Alexander-Walker really got into a rhythm and really got going. But I'm a big Gary Harris fan. I'm really excited to see what he looks like and what he does. I think he looks healthier than he's ever looked. But again, if he can hit that outside shot, he becomes a really, really valuable player. So I do think Gary Harris is ultimately in the starting lineup. Henry added a little bit later, we should get Suggs in the pick and roll more, get him going downhill. Pick and roll will be a weapon for Suggs since he's also a good passer. I agree completely with that too. I don't think we've seen a lot of pick and roll with Jalen Suggs quite yet. And I do think that is something that either the Magic are saving for the regular season or something that they just are not taking a look at this point. It would be important to get him some pick and roll chemistry with Wendell Carter, with Bamba, with whoever he's playing with as well. Daniel Mortensen with the idea here. I think this preseason is trying to put our guys in uncomfortable situations and see what happens. Would not surprise me if that is part of the strategy for the Orlando Magic. Again, Jamal Mosley has said that he wants his preseason games to be like training camp, to be an extension of their practice, an extension of training camp. So he's probably looking to put them in situations that he'd look at in practice right now. He's not looking to build, consistent rotations. He's not looking to build, what the team is going to look like in the regular season. He wants to see them play the same way. He wants to see them play with the same principles and the same ideas that he's preaching in practice. But I don't think, again, we're seeing kind of the consistency from the lineups that we'll see when the regular season begins. I'd love to see a dress rehearsal. I think a lot of coaches, back when they used to do 6 preseason games, a lot of coaches would use that penultimate game as a dress rehearsal. With the 4 preseason games, I think more coaches are starting to do things the way that Jamal Mosley's been doing them. Rest guys throughout, keep everyone fresh, work on specific things. Again, they're looking at these preseason games in a much different way than we are as the media, as fans. A lot of us, I think, are, this is our only public viewing of these teams and of the way they're going to play. So I do think what we'll see when the regular season begins will be quite different than what we're seeing right now. Again, not necessarily stylistically. The Magic are doing a really good job, I think, pushing the pace. That was actually one of the problems in Wednesday's game was the Magic weren't pushing the pace. It was a very low-pace game on Wednesday, and I think that favored the Pelicans. The Pelicans were a low-pace team last year. The Magic want to be a high-paced team. They had 101 possessions, I think, in the game against the Celtics. Last season in total, they were at like 99.7 or like 100. It's almost a full possession faster, which doesn't sound like a lot. But one possession per 48 minutes is a pretty significant jump over previous season. So I do think the Magic are trying to play with a lot more pace. They're trying to push the ball up the court. There's definitely a lot of focus on ball pressure and a lot more focused on trapping as well defensively. So I think we are seeing a team that is trying to kind of manufacture energy and use their energy to beat teams. And again, that might be a reason why the Magic ultimately do go much deeper into their bench just to keep guys fresh. As Ralph Henry says, RJ should be seeing more time. I think he should be too. I've been really impressed with how he's played. He still needs to kind of get himself a little bit under control in transition. Yes, he had the flat tire last night, but he's still kind of like going a little wild to the rim in the half court. So I think he still needs to kind of slow the game down, but his shot looks significantly improved. It looked that way in summer league. It still looks that way today. If he's able to hit from the outside, that's going to be a really interesting development for him. And honestly, I think that was one of the more interesting developments from the Magic's game against Monday was how good the Magic were shooting threes. They were not as good, obviously, Wednesday night. And so we still don't quite know what this team's philosophy is about shooting threes. They had, I think, 42 on Monday. I think they were at like 31 on Wednesday. And again, much lower pace game on Wednesday. But nonetheless, I do think it'll be interesting to see the Magic's relationship to the three-point line, even though they don't have a lot of great shooters. I think they still want to play a certain style and not necessarily play to a number, not have a target three-point number, but they want to give guys the green light to shoot threes. And I think that is really, really important. Kind of continuing to go through the comments again, feel free to continue leaving comments in the Spotify Green Room or on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify Green Room, you can go ahead and make a speaker request as well. Stephen Keller writes, love the energy. Definitely saw good things early in both games. Cole doing some good things, trying too hard at moments. Bamba looking much better hands. I agree with Bamba. I think Bamba has looked a lot better. I think defensively, he's still maybe a half step slow. Again, that's just kind of recognition and knowing where to be on the right spots. I was really interested in how he played last night going up against Jonas Valanciunas. And I think physically he handled himself pretty well. It was just a little bit late. Typically when guys foul, the way that Bamba was fouling, especially, it's because they're late. It's because they're late to their spots. They're late to where they need to be to stop or contest a shot. It was definitely a huge problem. Daniel Mortensen bringing up the point here that we go under too many screens. I agree with that. I think that was partially a strategy or a look the Magic were giving on Wednesday. I don't think they'll typically go under screens. On Monday's game, they went over a lot of screens. Wednesday, they definitely went way under screens. It was not effective. I think Wendell Carter said it after the game that, they kind of didn't know their personnel, or they didn't stick to their personnel books. They're probably not so focused on the other team right now. But they definitely lost some personnel and made some mistakes with whether to go over or under screen. So I completely agree with that. Ralph Henry notes something that I agree with here. The only issue on defense I'm having is giving up threes. We need to get a handle on that. I agree completely with that. I think the Magic's defensive strategy right now, and I think this is going to be the case, is they want to put pressure. If you get into paint, they're going to collapse. They're going to put two guys to the ball, really make it hard for you to kick out. I think they're trying to prevent clean passes to the outside. But what that also means is the weak side defender has to be in the right spot and has to be able to get back to the 3-point line very, very quickly if they do get a clean pass out, if they are able to get out before the trap comes. And so I agree. The Magic have given up a lot of open threes in the early part of the preseason and in the early part of the season here. That is a bit of a concern. I don't know if it's because they're working on something specifically or whether that is part of their defensive strategy and something that they're just going to be willing to give up right now to try and create some turnovers, create some pressure, and bank on being able to create enough pressure to slow down a pass back out to the perimeter or, cause the defender to fumble it so they can get back out there and defend the 3-point line and close out really, really well. Most defensive coaches are big on closeouts and big on technique with closeouts. So I think that is definitely something on the table as well. We're coming up here. It's a little bit past 6:00 here on the East Coast. If you, we'll close up shop here shortly, but if you have any questions, be sure to leave them. You can leave them if you're watching on YouTube in the chat. I am monitoring the chat from here. You can also, if you're on Spotify Green Room, obviously we're going through the chat room here as well, but you can also make a speaker request if you have a question as well. We are officially less than 2 weeks away from the start of the regular season, so I'll tell you a little bit about what we have planned here on Locked On Magic. We will be doing some pregame shows. We did one yesterday. When I'm available. So Wednesdays and Thursdays on road games, especially, we will probably do pregame shows, talk a little bit about the upcoming game. For special games, perhaps we'll do some post-game shows as well, do some live stuff. So with the integration of the YouTube channel and Locked On Magic, we'll be doing a lot more live stuff. So definitely feel free to save your questions and interact with us here on the show. I do want more direct interaction this year, and that's one of the great things about having a YouTube channel, as well as having access to Spotify Green Room here as well. We'll also be doing the Spotify Green Rooms, these weekly kind of chats as well. I'm hoping to make them fairly regularly on Thursday. Of course, I'm going to break that today and say that we will not be doing one next Thursday or next week at all. So we will be doing these kind of live mailbags and live chats as well. Again, one of my big goals for this season on Locked On Magic is to have more integration with you, the audience. Obviously, I'm a solo podcaster. I drone on. I talk a lot. I pontificate. I'm alone here. I want to hear more from you guys. I want to include you guys in the show a whole lot more this year. So please, expect to see a lot of these Spotify Green Rooms. We'll try and make them at a regular time. I'm sorry, I had to make a late time change today after I announced it was going to be at 5. We made it at 5:30. So we will do a lot more of these. We'll interact a whole lot more. I get my best ideas for what to talk about from you guys. I crowdsource a lot. I'm on the Magic subreddit. Shout out to the Magic subreddit. I read all the comments. I read every tweet mention that comes to me. I'm here to help. I'm here to answer your questions as much as I can. And if I don't have a good answer or you bring up an interesting point, I'm going to go explore it. So I crowdsource a ton. You guys are my inspiration. And I do think Magic fans are some of the best in the league, sleeping giants, if you will, for waiting for this team to be back on top. Seeing that there are no more comments or no more speaker requests in, unless someone wants to jump in at the last second, we'll close up shop today. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Magic. And of course, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places you download podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. You can always, again, follow me as well on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can also now watch our show on YouTube if that's how you choose to consume your podcast. You can do so on YouTube. Just search for Locked On Magic. That's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. We'll be back again Monday for another episode of Locked On Magic. We'll recap the Magic's home preseason opener against the San Antonio Spurs. But until next time, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again for another episode of Locked On Magic.